you have not yet received the little voucher card, the little yellow voucher card, we'll get that to you at the end of the next session, or we may have to started. I'm going to check with Catherine. Okay, folks, we're running a little behind, so I'm going to get going. Unfortunately, we won't have time for Q&A, so that we can finish this portion of today's program and then move to the final two panels back in the bigger courtroom. As you can hear, the students have just come out of their exams and they're excited. But that won't stop us from speaking in very stern tones to them, so please lower their voice. Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan Cole is the director of the Trauma and Learning Policy Initiative, a joint program of Harvard Law School and the nonprofit children's rights organization, Massachusetts Advocates for Children. At Harvard, she holds a joint appointment as Education Law Clinic Director and Lecturer on Law, and is a Senior Project Director at MAP, the Massachusetts Advocates for Children. Ms. Cole's work is based on research at the intersection of psychology, education, and law that links traumatic experiences to a host of learning, relational, and behavioral difficulties in school. She oversees TLPI's work in schools and its representation of families in the Education Law Clinic to inform ongoing policy and educational activities. She holds a JD from Northeastern University, a master's in special education from the University of Oregon, and a bachelor's from Boston University. Prior to becoming a lawyer, she taught in Watertown, Massachusetts, and Woodstock, Connecticut public schools, experiences that continuously inform her current work. And so now for our presentation about policy, how policy can be done, very much in response to so much of what's already been heard today, I give you Susan Cole.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here. And I must add, especially exciting because I'm here at the alma mater of our beloved Senator Elizabeth Warren, who speaks so highly of her experience. And I'll stand in her shoes. So I'm from the Trauma and Learning Policy Initiative. I don't know if you see that. Traumatized children learn. Maybe some of you have seen it or used it. You can find them on the web. And a lot of information is in there. Our website is traumasensitiveschools.org, and there are videos and a lot more information. As you can see, the title of our work is it's about policy. What are we going to do with all this amazing information that was discussed this morning? How are these points going to help us lead into a policy agenda? So to say a little more about who we are, we're a joint partnership with MAP and Harvard. Our goal, our mission is to ensure that children traumatized by exposure to violence and other adverse experiences succeed in school. So that's our mission, school success. Now, our model of change it has three parts to it. We represent families in the Education Law Clinic, much like Esther does right here at Rutgers. and one of our graduates is here today. We also work very deeply in schools. We have 5 ongoing demonstrations in schools right now, working to create a trauma-sensitive environment that's described in this second book, in this teal book here. So a lot of the information comes from working deep in schools, working with families, and then bringing both of those voices to the policy level. So it's a unique, like Esther described, it's a unique position to be able to be working from ground up. So the information is interesting, and we can bring those voices up to the State House, and there's a powerful voice to be brought there. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the points raised this morning, but let's put a policy panache or a lens on it as we go. Now there's 5 points in this presentation, and you've heard them, that many students have had traumatic experiences. We've heard all about that today. That trauma can impact learning, behavior, and relationships at school, and I think it's worth just going in a little bit more into how the particulars impact actual learning in school. That the third point, and this is the big point as we start to turn toward policy, we start to look at what could be the solution here. What is the solution? What has worked and what hasn't worked? And what I teach in my course on education, advocacy, and systemic change at the law school is that you start by gathering a lot of information, which we did this morning. But then before you jump to layer strategy, and we have messed things up a lot by not holding the line and spending a lot of time on what is the solution here. And we need to look at solutions that go beyond what lawyers can do, that go beyond what psychologists can do, that go beyond what educators can do. But if we can vision solutions that bring us all together, all of our voices can be heard. Then you can turn to advocates and lawyers and everyone, because we believe educators are really the key advocates here, and families, to develop the strategies to get us there. So some of what we're going to talk about now is this, the process of developing a solution that brings all our disciplines and all our voices together, and then begins to talk about some of the strategies. And I'll try, if we have time, I'll take you through the Safe and Supportive Schools Law that got passed in Massachusetts. The key point there being that we can set the conditions to create trauma-sensitive schools. We cannot stuff it down people's throats, but we can create the conditions for it. And a lot of points were raised in your questions. And we'll try, let's just take it as it goes. So we talked about this, the ACE study. What's the point of going over the ACE study? We saw it this morning. I'm not intending to go over it again. The point is, and it was made this morning, that there are lots of children who are affected by traumatic experiences. And the public policy point when we're looking at education is that educators aren't going to know who's been traumatized and who hasn't. It's going to be, a classroom, and if you think about it, 65% of the children have had traumatic experiences. Do we need to create environments that work for everybody, those who have been traumatized and those who haven't? And in the ACE, I'm sure you've seen the ACE pyramid, it kind of draws together what we said this morning, that adverse experiences form the foundation for social, emotional, and cognitive challenges, adoption of health risk behaviors, including substance abuse, can lead to disease and disability and early death. Now the reason I put this up here is because I'm circling the early part of the pyramid, which is where schools sit. Before a child's learning is developed, before the child adopts health risk behaviors, we have a real opportunity here to put a halt in the progression up the ACE pyramid. So the second point was that trauma can impact learning behavior and relationships at school. Now, there's a point, it's worth talking for a second trauma is, because it's a major public policy point to consider. Trauma is a response to adversity. And what that means is that every child will respond according to their age, their gender, all the things we heard about, their epigenetic proclivity. Everyone's going to be very different, and that's what causes the misunderstanding in school, right? Because you can have two children in the same family, and one of them is right on this go-to-jail pipeline, and the other one's the valedictorian. It's a conundrum, and that's one of the reasons we need a complex solution here, because there's not going to be one-shoe-fits-all approach. And the next point is, what areas does trauma impact at school? Well, academics certainly, and we heard a lot about reading and the importance of it. I think it will be obvious when we go through the next slide why that's so important. Classroom behavior and relationships. So bear with me and I'll take you through a couple slides, 3 slides, one on each of these areas. When we think about academic performance, we want to think in 2 areas. One is the skills children need to learn, right? It has a tremendous impact on language. That's why reading can get very, it can be, sorry, a little distracting. But trauma can affect a child's ability to process verbal and nonverbal information. So they might be slower in thinking. You may need instructions repeated. Many things. You see them use it, might have learned to use language in an instrumental way rather than as a way to create relationships. And of course, we've learned today how absolutely critical relationships are. Sequential organization. I mean, the first thing, I'm an old reading teacher, I mean, you have to know that one letter goes after the next letter and that the words go in a certain order. But if a child is very confused by coming from a chaotic environment, it actually has a tremendous impact on reading. So does the issue of cause and effect. If cause and effect doesn't make sense, if you're a good kid but you still have bad things happen to you, it can really affect how you understand the story. And these are things that I think our lecture this morning about reading, why it's so absolutely critical. Because good curriculum and good reading, where the child can restore who he is or she is in the context of reading, can restore and develop these, bring back these capacities for sequencing, we could keep going, but I wanted to give you a little piece of it. But you get really into this is about learning. It's all about learning. The other area of academics is has a lot to do with executive functioning. Again, we heard about the importance of that this morning and how it's affected. But you think about that. You think about the child in the high school who's just easily has trouble with transitions, for example. Just as you get into the classroom, you look around, who's behind you? Is anybody going to hurt me? Am I safe? And just as you're getting comfortable, they're 10 minutes into the class, right? And you miss the instructions. And then just as you start, the teacher helps you, you start getting to learn again, the bell rings. These kids have a lot of difficulty with transition. And you see that a lot in school. Attention is a big issue, and we talked this morning about, is it ADD, is it not ADD? Can you have both? Can you have a broken arm and a broken leg? It is possible. And then just the issue of having a goal, believing in that goal, developing a plan and carrying it out. Those are absolute essential skills for academic success. But you can well imagine how that is impacted by traumatic experiences. Well, I believe there's a future. If your future's been, if your sense of your worldview's been disrupted. So moving on to behavior, these are, I'm sure this doesn't surprise you to see this list. Different children will respond in different ways. The child who's perfectionist isn't always the valedictorian. Sometimes they're the child who would rather get in trouble than make a mistake, and would be glad to miss recess rather than have anyone think he or she couldn't do the math problem. On the other hand, another response to that very same issue can be to run for student president and be the high-functioning student. But we've sort of gone over these terms this morning, but we see that acting out, the acting in, the dissociation, it's all over the map. Now, in terms of relationships, which again is absolutely critical for learning, we learn in the context of relationships, and we succeed in the context of relationships. That's how we grow. But a child who has problems with trust will often push that teacher away. And when the teacher gets pushed away, it's easy for that teacher then to feel rejected and push the child back. I won't go through all of these, but every one of these has its own story to it, and vignettes that we all, you can't identify your own emotions, you can't really have a conversation, you can't really read the story, you have to relate to the character of the story. So what does this mean? Now, someone mentioned misunderstanding this morning. The big problem was misunderstanding, and I went, yes. Because we see that as one of the biggest public policy issues on the plate. That if the child's perspective is so different from the adults, then how are we ever going to understand each other, right? And where do we even begin? But a child might be saying, well, danger's everywhere, I must always be vigilant. From an adult perspective, and I see this all the time in my cases, he won't pay attention, he's smart, but he just won't try. And I don't know how many times you've heard that, but I've heard it many, many times. If I'm perfect, I'll protect myself and my character. And that's a good kid. It flies into the radar. What's that actually? The child says, I've got to be in control because the rest of my life is out of control. How does that appear at school? Well, that could be the defiant, the aggressive child. And I can't trust that you have my best interests. And of course, he rejects all the help I try to give. We have this dilemma at the policy level that we need to put on the table as we move forward, because the outcomes are going to be significant. Right? If we unintentionally distance ourselves with students or misunderstand traumatic reaction as character or misperceive students as lazy, which just happens every day. And of course we impose punitive responses, at tremendous rates. So we have what feels like an out of control problem, but let's not make it out of control. Let's really look at what students need. So, of course, what's the impact on students when the adults behave this way? I don't have to read it. But we know all of these issues can be very much related to how we behave toward children. Because we all know when we reach out to families and we inform about their children and we bring them in, the attendance goes up. And when we push kids and their parents away because we decide they're bad parents, the attendance goes down. The point, though, is we can't just pick one of these things. We've got to find a holistic remedy that's going to hold us all together. All of our disciplines, all of our approaches. So let's start to turn. This orange part is number 3. That's where we start to turn towards solutions. Now, we have, what we've learned from the literature is a child interacts with his community, those around him, the relationships around him. This is really important. This is about ecology and the child interacting with his environment. A safe, supportive environment can help children calm their brains and go on to it. And so the argument goes, if I'm standing before the Supreme Court, well, schools are communities for children. And we know that children have to feel safe everywhere. They have to feel connected to adults and peers everywhere. That we also know that no one teacher can do this alone. It's a mistake to put this all on the backs of teachers. Teachers are the frontline people, but they need an infrastructure of support around them. They need leaders that support them. And again, we're just looking at the complexity of the problem and the solution before we, get there. We won't know who all's affected. Look at all these things. And we know, the real critical thing is we know that when we act in a trauma-sensitive way, it's good for everybody. The students who are traumatized, their peers. When we create community, we get creative. So let's go forward with this. Now, here's our definition of a trauma-sensitive school. It's one in which all students feel safe, welcomed, and supported, and where addressing trauma's impact on learning is at the core educational mission of the school. It's the regular way we do things here. Now, we talk a lot about interventions and expensive ones. But as we were listening, and I'm listening to the talk about reading, what we're really looking for is a trauma-sensitive environment that weaves trauma sensitivity into every single thing we do. Right? Including the curriculum, including the way, especially the way we teach. But it's also so you have a good experience reading some literature that's wonderful, and you go in the hallway and you're getting bullied. It has to be a whole school endeavor undertaken by a whole school. And there needs to be a whole state supporting that. And of course, a whole federal government supporting it. For right now, we'll go with states. We're going to get too difficult in our challenge. So it's all students, it's school-wide, and it's at the core educational mission, the way we do things. So in our work, with our demonstration schools, and we've been working in schools for 15 years and seeing all kinds of marvelous things happen. But what makes these marvelous things happen? It's not having a one-shoe-fits-all, or me coming up with the curriculum that's going to work. It's about empowering the staff, unleashing their creativity, so they can create a trauma-sensitive community that can then hold the children to be trauma-sensitive. And the 6 attributes that we've pulled out through our work is, and we heard this morning, everyone's got to share a deep understanding of what trauma is and how it impacts learning. We also need to understand that we need a whole school approach. We're going to all need to get on the same page here. Supporting students to feel safe, that's at the core of trauma, so that's got to be an essential piece of the school culture. Supporting children in holistic ways, right? We talk about social emotional learning, but we see 4 core, what we call domains for success, and one of them is supporting relationships with adults and peers, because if you don't have friends, you drop out of school. Teaching children to self-regulate their behavior, not just be managed. There's one thing to manage a classroom. You can get classroom control by handcuffing students to the desk. But it's about teaching them to self-manage and academic success and supporting their mental health and physical well-being. A trauma-sensitive school makes sure all the students feel connected and a part of that school community. Now, in a trauma-sensitive school, obviously, the school has to embrace teamwork. Again, it's not a one-person activity, right? And it has to be able to anticipate and adapt. We have one school that has a Haitian population, and the earthquake came, and they knew they were going to get an influx. And they really did. They got children who had lost parents, who were found in the rubble, and were coming up to be with relatives. And they had to scramble, but they had done a lot of work to become trauma sensitive, and they're now kind of actually, if you want to watch a video about them and their transformation, you can go on our website, Trauma Sensitive Schools, and there's a beautiful video. It's a Baker School in Brockton, which is, highly organized. So, it's easier to watch that video than to try to abstractly look at 6 elements of a trauma-sensitive school. But we don't have time to show you that today. So we begin to think about, well, how does it happen? We saw those 6 elements, right? Like I was saying before, you could manage a classroom by handcuffing children to posts or to their desks. But part of the key is that we want to, with every action we take, we want to make sure that that action is connected to the values and norms of a safe and supportive trauma-sensitive school. So these are questions that schools can ask each other as they engage in their daily work. In the demo schools, we made little, cards and put it in their lanyards, And every time you start to do something, you can look at it. And that's a little like the glasses that were put, Dr. Kelly put on, you ask people to keep on their desks. But these are 6 questions to just keep you connected to norms and values. The norms and values are the critical piece. Then we have to think about how are we going to make this a whole school approach so that it's not just, in the special ed classroom or a trauma-informed therapy session, and then the child walks out into the lunchroom and again is getting bullied and undoes everything. So we want to think about, how we can keep on the front burner the whole school approach. And so what we found, and in Massachusetts we've incorporated this into law, in about 10 laws. Like, we're saying that if you organize the school, not by program, but by school operation. And by this I mean, look at these 6 elements of school operation, and if you come up with more, that's fine with us. But rather than saying, okay, I have my publisher's instruction, and I'm going to follow it in lockstep over here to do my bullying, and I'm going to follow the publisher's instruction on a truancy program over here, and they never relate. And the SEL doesn't relate to the PBIS, and what you have are what we lawyers did to you all, to everybody. We wrote these fragmented laws that make it nearly impossible to create a whole school foundation for learning. So what we're trying to do in Massachusetts, and if it's useful elsewhere, please take it, is to create a statewide framework that's organized by school operations, the way an administrator rolls out a program, and then the drivers of each of these initiatives are part of it. So we're interviewing experts across the country on social emotional learning, on positive behavior supports, on trauma sensitivity, and we're trying to create the drivers and say, what do you need to do at each of these levels? And then we ask, suggest people, when they go to do an action, is leadership involved? Because you cannot undertake creating a trauma-sensitive school without leadership. And leadership doesn't have to start from leadership, but it needs to get there. It can come from the educators and creating a coalition and moving outward, but ultimately, without leadership, it's going to be undermined. And of course, all the rest of these are important aspects of any action that's undertaken. It needs to fit the norm, the action needs to fit the norms and values, and it needs to be whole school. And we can talk more about solution later, but I do want to move into 4, which is how do we get there? And this is something that I think kept coming up in the questions before. There's not a magic bullet here. It's about how we take action. It's not about a program. It's about a process of culture change. We hear a lot about school climate. School climate is how you feel when you walk in the building that day. But school culture is something different, and I took this list out of this lovely book, School Culture Rewired, and I recommend this book. But what is school culture? It's part of the air we breathe, the way we do things around here. That's very different from just how I feel at a given moment. I might be kind of down or I might be up, but how do we do things here? Do we do things in a trauma-sensitive way that need, what are our values and norms? Okay? They're embedded beliefs. And a lot of the problem, you know, in these negative school cultures is having a culture that isn't safe and supportive, or we would say trauma sensitive. So, in our work, and if you read this book, what we have learned from watching schools do this is that there needs to be a process of change, right? And that it has to be a very empowering process of change for everyone. And so it's really critical to start with the school's own urges. What is that school? You know, no one ever asks the educators, what's most important here? We tend to write a law and kind of have it dripped down at everybody. But if people sit around the table and say, what's our biggest problem here? Are we suspending too many students? Are we, our scores are too low? Or this is, you know, let's work on it and let's agree on what it is. Then they can talk about, are we ready to solve this problem in a trauma-sensitive way? That needs to be a conscious decision. It's not something you can impose on people. And so we encourage a lot of professional learning groups and discussions at the school to decide, are we ready? Do we want to do this? Do we want to embrace trauma sensitivity? And that they, you know, to develop an action plan. And when we talk about sustainability in a trauma-sensitive school, it's very critical. It's also critical in an approach like this that the educators, when they develop their action plan, look at how they're going to measure this. Right? I mean, it's not particularly rocket science because we've had schools say we want to reduce our the visits to the office for disciplinary reasons. Well, they usually collect that data. But it's very empowering to the school to see that once everybody joins together as a team, creates a vocabulary throughout the school that's shared and is trauma sensitive. How quickly something like detentions and trips to the office decrease. And then you start to see the excitement start to happen. And people are ready to go on to the next issue. Because once they've formed a team, that's really the critical piece. Once everybody's formed a team and begun to create a school culture, the spiral starts to happen where people take on the next issue and the next issue. And what we're seeing now as we've moved into the second year of the demo schools is because people so quickly solved their, everybody had behavior management as their first goal, and forming a community. They're starting to talk about issues of equity and racism. But you have to get the environment has to be very comfortable for the educators in order to broach those issues. You can't just plop it on people. You have to create an environment. And what we're encouraging is to say, take the time to create a trauma-sensitive community. And we believe, schools need to be offered tools to do this. But what we're finding in the demo schools, they didn't get a penny to do it. What they got was us as facilitators. Where the money tends to go is sometimes schools need a facilitator to organize this sort of sense, help people develop that sense of community, find their urgency, decide if they're ready. We really want to do this, develop their action plan. That can be really helpful if it's someone good. And then sometimes because of teacher contracts, the funding will go to staying after school to do this. But we found so many exciting things happen that people were doing on their own time. And there's simple things like, one school set a goal of creating let's get on the same page, and they simply did a bulletin board, and the teachers did it very creatively, and they made little Facebook looking icons for everybody, and they everybody just answered the question, what language do you speak and what do you like to do? It became the centerpiece for a community in that school, and more conversations were happening, and families were saying, oh, the custodian speaks Japanese, I'm Japanese, and turned out he had a girlfriend who was Japanese, so he learned Japanese, and then they formed that connection, and more things kept happening just in a natural way. There's no one-to-one correspondence when you use a process to create a trauma-sensitive school, in the sense that Susan goes and does a training, and now therefore you will be trauma-sensitive. It's much more about a process of change, about people understanding what it is and defining what it is for their own schools. Some of these schools have started to do videos on what are trauma sensitive, and the term safe and supportive is taking hold in Massachusetts. What is our safe and supportive school? Right? Or another school did a looks like, sounds like chart. Like, you know, when they see this problem, what's our way of responding? What kind of words do we use in the school? They did a chart. It's just wonderful. It works for them. It might not work for the school that wanted to do the videos. But that's really good. The question is, how do we foster, how do we set the conditions for creative approaches that are whole school and that are connected to the values of a trauma-sensitive, or some people call trauma-informed school. This is the, this is our sort of chart, that we suggest people walk through these 4 questions. Again, it's about asking questions. It's not about giving answers. So that's in my quick discussion here. That's sort of our proposal for starting the discussion on what the solution is. But what we are really suggesting is that we spend a lot of time thinking about what that solution is. Let's not jump to legislation, and let's not jump to policies or one way to do things until we've really worked with the community. And each community is so different. And, I feel the difference being in Newark than I do in Boston. I think I know Boston pretty well. I don't know Boston well. But Newark is Newark, and Newark has to create the environment for trauma sensitivity that meets the needs of Newark families. And we think there are tools that can be offered, and videos, and here's how this one did and that, but basically what we think needs to happen is a shared framework to work on. Let's figure out what the norms are, the values, and share practices. But let's also make the commitment to doing it on a whole school basis. And that if we make sure we weave this into all school operations, that we can find just super creative things going on all over the country. And it doesn't have to be high cost, because we've seen it. We've been doing this for 25 years, and grant programs at the state level, and all that kind of stuff. Experiment and learn from our mistakes. We are more than happy to share them with you. Make sure we live our traumas. But I think that the key thing when we talk about policy is how can we set the conditions that support creation of safe and supportive trauma-sensitive school cultures? Right? It's not ordering it. It's not saying you will all now do it exactly the way Massachusetts is doing it. It's about, and because even though Massachusetts law doesn't order anybody to, it provides tools, it provides a mission and vision, and it's, it's got a safe and supportive schools commission that's really working to message this at the governor level. It's going to go way up there. The governor level, the State Department of Ed level, the district level, the school level, and the family level. Do you all, what time is it? Now, we have about 10 minutes. I could walk you through the Massachusetts law quickly, or we could do questions. Quiet. You want to just see quickly what are the core concepts? That would help. I was worried because David said she'll just tell you how they do it happy to share. Newark is going to needs to do it the way that works best for Newark and the state of New Jersey. So, okay, so what this guiding principles, in the law, if schools identify their owner, they're going to be all different and no action plan is going to look the same. Hard for the State Department of Ed, but they kind of have to live with it. And we have school improvement plans where you can take the action plans and put the school improvement plans in there, reviewed by the superintendent and school committee. You know, it depends on how it works here, whether you can do something like that or something. But don't take that away from the schools. Don't tell them what to do. They know. It's about aligning initiatives. Again, back to the lawyers who wrote so many different laws. We have a bullying law, we have a truancy law, we have, it's a major juggle with reports that are due at all different times. It's an absolute juggle. Well, if you really look at the drivers behind each of these initiatives, they're strikingly similar, including trauma sensitivity. What you do, at the core of all of these is a feeling of safety. Social skill development, you can call it an SEL, and in trauma you call it relationships. We find they're very similar, but they have to be aligned. So we're creating a statewide framework to align them. Locally tailored solutions allow for the creativity at the local level. It's the teachers who know how to teach. Involving all the stakeholders, we heard a lot about involving the community and families. Both in designing the overarching solution and then how it's going to play out at the local level. And we need in our laws to allow schools to have the time and resources to engage in a process of culture change. So just the basics of it. That's our governor of that moment in 2014 signing this law. And it defines a safe and supportive school. So look at the definitions. Schools that foster safe, positive, healthy, and inclusive whole school learning environments. So you can see the whole school got in there, and the safe and the supportive. And then what I think is really great that our legislators did was they wanted a whole child definition. Because once we get our state focused on a whole child definition, then you have to align the initiatives. Otherwise, the adults are dividing children. You've got an arm that's SEL and a leg that's PBIS. Actually, you're a whole child, and we're going to make these initiatives work for you. And so they listed out all the different initiatives they want to see integrated because they were getting, of the State House, the administrators coming up and saying, don't throw one more initiative at me, right? They said to this commission that gets set up in the law, I want you to do a framework that integrates all of this. So I hope everyone can just get a sense of how many initiatives we throw. And trauma sensitivity is one, but it needs to be part of the whole. It's part of everything we do. We also need to prevent bullies, or else we don't have a trauma sensitive school. And then it's tools and a process. We think that's really useful too. And so that's where we're getting this statewide framework. And, we're happy to send you links and everything. It's being updated and an online self-assessment tool. So when people sit down to look at their whole school environment, they can look at all the aspects of all the 6 elements of school operation that we listed. And we can say, here's some ideas of what I could do to engage families better, some best practices here. That the schools will pick and choose what they need to do to work for their community. And then that was such a Massachusetts one about the vote. That this is about an inclusive process for developing a plan. I think that every state can figure out how they would do it. In our school, we have school councils. In our state, we have school councils, and the legislature decided the school council should develop a plan. But they also gave it out to the principal because sometimes the school council isn't the best group, and that the principal can figure out a group that might be more sensitive to cases. So here's the statewide infrastructure. Now, we have to work this through the state level, so the state has to give technical assistance. The idea is to create a community of practice where there will be conferences, that this will spread by people sharing with people. But don't worry about that. The idea is, just like at the school level, where we want the first people to develop coalitions and leaders on board, at the state level, the state needs to foster a community of practice around policy. Know what I said, just like at the school level, where we're encouraging people to develop coalitions, get the principal on board, get the superintendent on board. We need to get the state on board to provide the community of practice, to create that community of practice. And that's how we're slowly winding this into the culture of a state. It's a slow process. Someone was talking to me earlier, it's slow. How will they accept that? But at least this one state has been accepting it. They get ritzy with us. One of the things they set up was the Safe and Supportive Schools Commission, and I'm the co-chair of it. And we are to investigate and make recommendations on the capacity that's needed at the statewide level to support schools to do this work. And we're going to they love us right now because we're developing tools, schools who want to do it are just doing it, but then we're going to be coming up probably with a recommendation on coordination that probably will have a tag on it. Because we're interviewing our top leaders across the state. What do you need to do to implement this? What do you need to do? And to a T so far, and we're still interviewing, they said, we need someone to drive this at the district level. And we'd like to have lead teachers at the local level. We'd like to have coordination everywhere. But the coordination has to reach out to the community, reach the school out to the community, because teachers have exquisite knowledge of kids. And you don't want to lose that by just putting all the resources in the community. You want to have that connection. And that linkage is really important. We think it needs to be at the school to reach out so that it's drawn together and really support the whole child. But then there also needs to be a tremendous amount of coordination at the local level, at the school level, because there are philosophies to overcome, punitive discipline. It's not, I don't want to say it's that easy, but if we can get our state and local cultures on board, until we get to that point where everybody wants either an SEL coordinator or a Safe Sport Schools coordinator or a trauma-sensitive schools coordinator, whatever we call it, we're not at the money part yet. And we'll let you know as we're writing a report and we'll come up with what our leaders think. But I do encourage you, as you do policy, to please listen to the people who are being affected. It was the superintendents who said we have too many initiatives. It's the superintendents who said, let us tell you what kind of capacity we need to do it. And listening to them has been phenomenal. We've also done focus groups all over the state with parents. And it's shocking to schools that people are feeling they're doing so much to reach out to parents, and parents are saying, no, I don't feel reached out to, I don't feel engaged. We've got to analyze that and figure out what the problems are. And again, create systems that work for each community. It will not be the same anywhere. A framework, I think, is a good thing. A top-down order for trauma sensitivity, I don't think it's going to work. That's.
Thank you so much, Susan. So our next panel will start in 30 seconds. If you all can just, I'm kidding, 40 seconds. So please just up the stairs and back to your seats and we'll begin as quickly as we can. Thank you.
I really enjoyed stuff like that, Good. So I think we talked a while ago about maybe which really one would be left. Oh yeah, one of politics is great. I didn't know I'm sure I did politics. Probably. But no, I think all that would be really would be cool. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. And I learned so much. But there's two things that happen in all those things. One, there's stuff you learn. And the other is you think of things you normally don't get a chance to sort of think about.
Yeah. And that's why I think it's good to have the first group, too, to have that conversation.
Probably pretty good in the class on community health assessment.
And these policies, you know what? It should, if it's effective, catch.
It's in your outline.
The label, something like some, it's what we do. Our brains move a little different.